Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott with Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue. Welcome to this Torah teaching. Today we are looking at the Torah portion, which is Tisa, when you take. This comes from Shemot, Exodus chapter 30 through chapter 34. We'll begin with a summary, and the summary looks like this. Moses conducts a counting, a census, of the people by collecting a half shekel by all men aged 20 and over. Moses is commanded to make a copper laver for the Mishkan, and the women donate the necessary metal. The formula of the anointing oil is specified, and Adonai instructs Moses to use this oil only for dedicating the Mishkan, its vessels, and Aaron and his sons. Hashem selects Bezalel and Aholiav to be the master craftsmen for the Mishkan and for its vessels. The Jewish people are commanded to keep the Shabbat as an eternal sign that Adonai made to the world. Moses receives the 2 tablets of testimony on which are written the 10 commandments. The mixed multitude that left Egypt with the Jewish people panic when Moses' descent seems delayed, and they force Aaron to make a golden calf for them to worship. Aaron stalls and tries to delay them, and Adonai tells Moses to return to the people immediately, threatening to destroy everyone and build a new nation from Moses. When Moses sees the idol worship, he smashes the tablets and destroys the golden calf. The sons of Levi volunteer to punish the transgressors, executing 3,000 men. Moses ascends the mountain again to pray for forgiveness for the people, and Adonai accepts his prayer. Moses then sets up the Mishkan, and Adonai's cloud of glory returns. Moses asks Adonai to show him the rules by which he operates and functions, and is granted only a small portion of this request according to the teachings of our sages. Adonai tells Moses to carve new tablets and reveals to him the text of the prayer that will invoke, that will plead his mercy. Idol worship, intermarriage, and the combination of milk and meat are prohibited. The laws of Pesach, the firstborn, the firstfruits, Shabbat, Shavuot, Sukkot are delineated, and then Moses ascends with the second set of tablets. His face is luminous, glows as a result of contact with Adonai. Okay, that's a short summary of this week's Parsha, jam-packed, very full Parsha. I want to take some time with you, and I've discussed this with several of you, so maybe this is a review for some of you, but I think it's a helpful review. What I want to do is I want to talk about a literary structure that the Torah uses extensively, and that literary structure is called a chiasm. It is spelled C-H-I-A-S-M, chiasm. And a chiasm is a literary form that looks something like this. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up on your screen, and you will see that here in front of you. What you see on your screen then is this format. It is basically in the literature, in the prose, or in the text, you'll have an element A, and then you'll have an element B, C, D, or some iteration thereof. And then this is mirrored by another element A, another element B, another element C, another element D. And so what we end up with is examples in literature of chiasms that look like this. John F. Kennedy was famous for using chiasms in his speeches. A former president, let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Or another one that he's famous for saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but for what you can do for your country. These are examples of chiasm. Another one by Peter de Vries, the value of marriage is not that adults produce children, but that children produce adults. Another example, you can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. So you have the girl, and then the country, and the country, and the girl. You can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. And we see this kind of layout. I'll go ahead and bring this up on your screen again. And we see this kind of layout, which is showing you can take the girl, element A, out of the country, element B, but you can't take the country, element B, out of the girl, element A. Or ask not what your country, element A, can do, element B, for you, element C, rather what you, element C, can do, element B, for your country, element A. So you have country and country, or element A, can you, element B, and what can do, what your country can do, element B can do, element C, you, element C, you. So this is examples of what we have here in literature. Other examples of chiasms in the Bible, and the Bible makes extensive use of chiasms from the Gospels. Mark chapter 2, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Another one, Matthew chapter 23, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, those who humble themselves will be exalted. Both these are examples of chiasms. We also have chiasms found in Shakespeare, chiasms found in classical literature, and so on and so forth. In literature, most often we see examples of chiasms, and one specific thing about a chiasm in literature that we see, I'll bring this up again. In literature, oftentimes the chiasms that you see are element A, element B, element B, element A, or maybe element A, B, C, C, B, A. What we find in the biblical text, oftentimes, especially in the Torah and in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, what we find is that the chiasms have a center. Nearly always, the chiasms have a center. And what that is you'll find element A mirrored by element A, element B mirrored by element B, element C mirrored by element C, and then element D mirrored by element D, and then you find a center, or maybe the center is between element B and element B or something like that. But what we find frequently in the biblical record are these centers. And what this does is serve to focus the meaning of the passage. And sometimes we'll have these very long, complex passages that seem to repeat themselves, and when you drill down and parse and analyze it, you find that there's definitely a chiasm structure in there. And then you find this extra thing, that the chiasm structure has indeed a center. And the center is kind of the point of the passage, or the thrust of the spear, if you will. All right, so looking at this current parsha, we've got this from the current parsha. We've got that Adonai is saying, my Shabbats you shall keep. Tell the people of Israel, Shemot 31, verse 12 and 13, tell the people of Israel, you are to observe my Shabbats, Exodus chapter 31. And so this is what we see in the text here in Exodus 31. And then immediately following that verse, we have a passage, and I want to analyze this passage from the perspective of a chiasm. So let me bring this up on your screen, and we'll take a look at it and see what we can do here. All right, on your screen, and this begins in Exodus chapter 31, and I'll just bring this up on a parallel screen for myself here, and we're looking at Exodus 31. You can turn there if you like. And this in Exodus 31, but it's not entirely unrecognizable in the English. Sometimes we end up with literary structures or things that we're teaching out of the text, and you almost have to study it in Hebrew in order to get it. This is not one of those places. It's apparent in the English. translations. So that's helpful because sometimes we end up with things that are a little bit difficult to understand. Okay, so on your screen you should see a chiasm, and I don't know if you can see this very well on your screen. So for those of you who have a big screen, perhaps it's a little better. But in any case, we'll try to work through it and try to figure it out. Okay, so we're going to begin in Exodus chapter 31, verse 12. And it says this point blank, Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak now to Bnei Israel, surely you must keep my Shabbatot. It is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, so that you may know that I am Adonai who sanctifies you. Verse 14, Therefore you are to keep the Shabbat, because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it will die. Whoever does any work during Shabbat, that soul will be cut off from the midst of his people. Verse 15, Work is to be done for 6 days, but on the seventh day is a Shabbat of complete rest, holy to Adonai. Whoever does any work on the Shabbat will surely be put to death. So Bnei Israel is to keep the Shabbat, to observe the Shabbat throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and Bnei Israel forever. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he ceased from work and rested. So what we have here is we have a lot of kind of almost repetitive information about keeping the Shabbat. And at first it's just like, why are we repeating ourselves? It's almost like we're just kind of, pounding on this. And then you look at it in the Hebrew and it starts to really jump out at you. What you have here is a chiasm. All right, so let's walk through this. Starting with verse 13, surely you must keep my Shabbat. Or in different translations it might say, be sure to keep the Shabbat. Let's look at that. Let's get it up here in a different translation. And we'll come down. Tell the people of Israel, you are to observe my Shabbats. Okay, so that's where it's starting. It starts kind of like from that commandment. All right, going forward, in the English it says, for this is a sign between me and you. It is a sign between me and you. In the Hebrew, the word ki-ot-he, this shall be a sign. And then we're going to assign that to element A, which you're seeing on your screen. Element A is ki-ot-he in the Hebrew, or this shall be a sign. Let's see if okay, yeah, ki-ot-he. I'm looking at it now in the Hebrew. All right, so we're going to assign that ki-ot-he. This shall be a sign, and we're going to assign that to element A. We're going to call that element A. Scroll down in your text, if you will, whether you have it on your screen or you have it in a Bible. It might be better to have it on a Bible while you're looking at the chiasm on your screen, if you've got a book, if you've got a Bible. So look down, and we're starting with, after surely you must keep my Shabbat, for it is a sign. Look down and see if you see the word sign anywhere. And truthfully, yes, you do. Verse 17, it is a sign. Okay? It is a sign, and element A to element A in the Hebrew in verse 17 it says Ot he he'olam, Ot he le'olam. It is a sign, just like it said ki ot he. This shall be a sign. So interesting. We've got some grammar here, some tense here. This shall be a sign at the top, and then at the bottom, it is a sign. All right, so going on, and let's look at element B. Go back up, if you will, to verse 13. It is a sign between me and you, or you and me. It is a sign between me and you. And look at that, element B, b'nei uvenechem, between me and you. It says, element B. Let's go down and let's look in the text for something that says between me and you. And if we look, and sure enough, in verse 17, we have between me and Bnei Israel forever. Now, in the English translation, it might look like it's getting out of order. It is a sign between me and Bnei Israel forever. In the Hebrew, it's actually not out of order. If you look at verse 17, the chiasm order is preserved. It is between me and the sons of Israel, a sign forever. Or B'nai Uven B'nai Israel Ot He Le'olam Ki. It is a sign forever. The Le'olam forever. So the order is better preserved in the Hebrew, in my opinion. But just if you can understand that we have now made element B, assigned element B, and at the top here in verse 13, in verse 13, it says, between me and you, throughout your generations. And then element B at the bottom, verse 17, it says, between me and the children of Israel, B'nai Israel. Okay, so let's move on. Throughout your generations, it says in verse 13, throughout your generations, ledoratechem, and then we're going to assign that to element C. If you look down, you see ledoratam in the Hebrew, throughout their generations. There it is a sign throughout their generations. Actually, in verse 16 is the throughout their generations. Okay, so moving on, we assign that to element C. Element D, Ushamartem et ha-Shabbat ki kadosh hi lechem. You shall keep the Shabbat because it is holy to you, it says. Therefore you are to keep the Shabbat because it is holy to you. And this is verse 14. Looking down in your passage here, where do you see that same sentiment, that same idea? Therefore you are to keep the Shabbat, it is holy for you. Is there anything that speaks of holiness later on in the passage? And sure enough, so B'nai Israel is to keep the Shabbat. We see that. You are to keep the Shabbat, verse 14, and then verse 16, so B'nai Israel is to keep the Shabbat. So we're going to assign that to element D, and it says, you shall keep the Shabbat because it is holy to you. And then element D from verse 16, Veshamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat. It's a reference that is sometimes quoted in the liturgy, the Veshamru. The people of Israel shall keep the Shabbat. Therefore the sons of Israel shall keep the Shabbat to observe the Shabbat, it says in verse 16. In one translation, Complete Jewish Bible says, so B'nai Israel is to keep the Shabbat. Okay, element E. Anyone doing work shall be cut off. So we look down here, verse 14, after the word, it is holy to you, it says, everyone who profanes it will die. Whoever does any work during the Shabbat will be cut off from the people. Let's look at this. That's in the Tree of Life version, looking at it in Complete Jewish Bible. Everyone who treats it as ordinary must be put to death. For whoever does any work on it is to be cut off from his people. So that is 14, the second half of verse 14. And we're going to assign that to element E. And then element E again, Kol ha'oseh melacha. Up in element E there in verse 14, we have Mechalalela, Mechalaleha, Mot Yumat. It is the work, speaking of the work. So you see here, element E is again this concept of Melacha, this work. Anyone who does on any work on the Shabbat, the day of the Shabbat, Mot Yumat shall be put. Shall be cut off. Mot Yumat. Let's see, what do I have on Mot Yumat? Let's see, Elam Ki Seaset Yamim. Let's see, surely I've got this somewhere. It is 14. Oh, there it is. Okay. That person shall be. I don't see Mot Yamat. Where's? Oh, there it is. Hilachem Mehalala. Mot Yamat. Mot, to die or to be put to death or to be cut off. And the same, Yamat. Mot, surely. Definitely. Mot Yamat. Surely be put to death. Okay. So we've assigned that to element E. in the Complete Jewish Bible. It details it. On 6 days we get work done. The seventh day is Shabbat. It is holy unto them. Let me see if I can find this in the Hebrew, because it's a little easier to see in the Hebrew. Kadosh hi lachem. Starting in verse Kadosh hi lachem, Kadosh. There it is. Kadosh Adonai. Hashabi, Shabbat, Shabbaton, Kodesh, Adonai. That's that side of it. That's in verse 16. That's the bottom of it. But let me see if I can find it here oh, there it is. Ki Kadosh He. In verse 14 is where we refer to the Kadosh Hi Lachem, holy unto you. And so we have arrived now. The Shabbat is holy unto you. Verse 14, therefore you are to keep the Shabbat, it is holy unto you, holy for you. Comparing that to verse 15, the Shabbat is a Shabbat of complete rest, holy to Adonai. So where have we done this? Where have we arrived here? We've arrived at a center point between verses 14 and 15, and it is this. It is, work is to be done for 6 days, but the seventh is a Shabbat of complete rest, or Sheshet Yamim. Ya'aseh melacha uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton Kodesh LaAdonai. 6 days shall you labor, but the seventh is a Shabbat of rest, holy to Adonai. That's the center of this chiasm here in the text. All right, a couple of things I want to point out to you. One of those is looking at this chiasm, and what do you see in the grammar, in the tense of how everything is being verbalized. Let me just kind of read through it quickly and see if you can grasp it. It says in verse 13, speak now to Bnei Israel, surely you must keep my Shabbatot. All right, starting from there. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, so that you may know that I am Adonai who sanctifies you. Therefore you are to keep the Shabbat, because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it will die. In other words, every one of you who profanes it will die. For whoever you, does any work during the Shabbat, that soul will be cut off from the midst of his people. And then it says this, work is to be done for 6 days, but the seventh is a Shabbat of complete rest. All right, so let's put that on the shelf, that last phrase from 15. Work is to be done on the 6 days, but on the seventh is a day of Shabbat and complete rest. Now watch the tense change. Now it says holy, where it just said holy to you, now it says holy to Adonai. Whoever does any work on the Shabbat will be put to death. So Bnei Israel is to keep the Shabbat. It's not you keep the Shabbat, it's Bnei Israel to keep the Shabbat, to observe the Shabbat throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and Bnei Israel forever. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, the seventh day he ceased from his work and rested. So the first section here of this teaching is that Adonai is laying this out, and he's speaking to you. This is something for you. This is something that you need to get your hands around. Let me clear up the screen a little bit here and shut that down. This is what Adonai is speaking to you in the first place. It's an expression to you, speaking to you in that verb tense. And then in the second half, Adonai is phrasing this. It's about himself. It's almost as if he's speaking of himself. It would be like, so if I were to talk to my kids and I were to say, okay, You need to do your part of your family chores, and you need to do your part of your family business, and you need to be part of this family and contribute and participate in this family. I will participate in this family, and I will do this and this and this, and I will do this and this. And really the instructions are the same in both places. And do you see how fascinating this is? The instructions for the Shabbat, if you see this, the first half of the instructions for the Shabbat are for the people of Israel, for them to take personally. The second half of the instructions for the Shabbat are almost declarations or promises about God keeping that. It's what He's keeping. It's instructions, though. The instructions are the same. The instructions are the same. The instructions don't change. Nothing changes during this. The instructions do not change. But in one sense, it's the instructions to the people. In the other sense, it's the instructions about Adonai. And then, so I wanted to emphasize that. The difference in the wording, the duplication and the echoes, but the difference in how this is worded. Okay, that's one aspect of this. The other aspect of this that I think is really important and really important for us to get our hands around. So let me bring this up once more time on your screen. You've got your, let's see, nope, that's not it. There we go. Okay, so we've got on your screen, hopefully you can see it well enough, and we've got the chiasm laid out, and I want to draw your attention to this center statement. 6 days shall you labor, but the seventh is a Shabbat of rest, holy to Adonai. And that's the center. Remember, the center is like the thrust, the point of the passage. The chiasm is like this arrow form that is pointing, making a sign, a literary sign, if you will, to the center of the passage. Let's look at that and understand what's happening there. Let me go back to that one more time. How many steps are there to the passage? How many steps are there to the chiasm? Well, if you look at it, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the center. What is it? A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the center. What is the center of the chiasm? It is 6 days shall you labor, but the seventh is a Shabbat of complete rest, holy to Adonai. The seventh center of the chiasm is bounded by these 6 steps of the chiasm. So what is it that we think that this chiasm is talking about? The chiasm is talking about the Shabbat. And what is the context for the Shabbat here? Tell the people of Israel, you're to observe my Shabbats. And what do we see in the context of the Shabbat here? We see that in the center point, work is to be done for 6 days, but on the seventh day is a Shabbat of complete rest. In the beginning, there's all these verbiage of you, which is how it's worded. You, and then it's the people of Israel. The people shall do this. This is a sign between me and Bnei Israel. And so this is what we see. And then following all that, we have this 4 and 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he ceased from his work and rested. Now, a couple ways to interpret this. One of the ways to interpret this is, since there's so much focus in the first half of the chiasm on you, that is, when it gets to verse 15, work is to be done for 6 days, but on the seventh is a Shabbat of complete rest. That's the instruction to the people. And then what is the instruction to Adonai? What is the reference or context to Adonai in verse 17? It is a sign between me and Bnei Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth. What is he talking about? He's talking about the work that he's already done. He's already done his part. It's as if, okay, here's your work life, here's your work cycle, and the center point of your work cycle is going to be the Shabbat, but this is your work that you are to do. And then the seventh day is a Shabbat of complete rest, comparing that to the work that I did. What is the work that Adonai did? It is the work of creation. It is 6 days of creation with the seventh day of rest. And then we have this in verse 13. Speak now to Bnei Israel, saying, surely you must keep my Shabbatot, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, so you may know that I am Adonai who sanctifies. This is the purpose of that. We see this thing, it is a sign, so that you may know that I am Adonai who sanctifies. So we've got these two, this is Adonai who sanctifies you. That's not actually part of the chiasm. It's kind of a dangling verse that doesn't really fit the entire chiasm structure here. Verse 31, chapter 31, verse 17, we've got another one of these. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth. On the seventh he stopped working and rested. These are dangling verses, or they're kind of like anomalies within the chiastic structure here. You don't see these as dangling if you look at it from the verse numbers. But if you look at it from the perspective of the chiasm, they really do stick out. In other words, they're really obvious. Okay, why are these two verses kind of inserted here, kind of in one sense messing up the perfect pattern of our chiasm? Why are these two verses inserted here? First of all, so that you will know I am Adonai who sets you apart from me. And then verse 17, for in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, but on the seventh day he stopped working and rested. What's happening here? If you connect those two verses, what are we talking about? Verse 13, who sets you apart from me, that's sanctification. What is sanctification? Is there a connection between sanctification and creation? What is sanctification? Sanctification is calling something out to reserve it or redefine it for a different purpose or for a better purpose. It is repurposing, if you will, or recreating, if you will. When Adonai called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees, and was calling him out to make him a different people, to make him a special people, to have a blessing on the earth. When Adonai gave his Ruach, his spirit, to those in the upper room, the Talmudim, the disciples, he was calling them out for a different purpose amongst their fellow men, the Jews, to bring salvation to all of them, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. So this is what sanctification is. Sanctification is taking something and making it holy and making it special. Of all the food on the earth, I make my food holy by separating it and making it special before Adonai. My wife is holy to me. She is sanctified to me because she is different than every other woman on the planet. She is something to me, and I am something to her. We are sanctified unto each other. So that's what sanctification is. How do you connect sanctification and creation? There are two principles at work here, and that is, first, sanctification at creation was this idea that Adonai took, and first he created the heavens and the earth, and then he created the light and the darkness, and separating light from darkness. And we have all these sort of separations and categories and defining of things throughout the entirety of the creation narrative. There are two principles at work that we can point to very quickly. First is that Adonai has sanctified Israel. Adonai has sanctified Israel and made them special in the earth, and that Adonai has sanctified the Shabbat and made it a special day in the days of the earth. Adonai, the creator of the universe, the creator of mankind, and then the creator of, what did he create next? He created Eden. So we have a series of recreations, of drawing something out. Even the creation of Eve, is a kind of sanctification because she was drawn out of him. She is a recreation of him, of sorts. So you see this principle of this. Just walking through the narrative of the creation week, we have, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then we have God creating the light, and he divides the light from the darkness. So he's dividing it. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and morning one day. Then he put a dome in the middle of the water, let them divide the water from the water. Again, he's dividing, drawing things out. Let the water under the sky be gathered together into one place, let dry ground appear. In other words, that water under the sky is going to be gathered together, it's going to be sanctified, it's going to be drawn out and made special. It's going to be different than the other waters. And then the dry ground appears, and the dry ground is called earth. And then the earth brought forth grass, and then seed-producing plants and fruit trees, and so forth. And then there were lights in the sky to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, seasons, days, and years. God made two great lights, the larger light to rule the day and the smaller light to rule the night, and the stars. And God put them all in the dome of the sky, and is using these to sanctify and to set apart, and so on and so on and so forth. And then God said, this is in the creation week, let us make humankind in our image, in the likeness of ourselves. And then it says he created humankind in his own image, in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. After 6 days of creation, Adonai rested, and then he made the garden. He placed food in the garden, then he placed man in the garden. So after 6 days was the day of rest, and then the day after that was the beginning of a partnership with mankind, because he put mankind into the garden in the form of Adam and Eve. He put them into the garden in order to manage the garden. So here we see that creation itself, the week of creation itself, is a partnership between Elohim, creator of chapter 1, and Adonai Elohim, creator in chapter 2. We see Adonai Elohim in chapter 2 at the creation of the garden. And then we see Yeshua in John chapter 1. All things came to being through him, and without him nothing made had being. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him. So then we see the man in the garden working with Adonai to manage and maintain the garden. We see them both in the garden. This is why I say that creation itself became a partnership after the garden. This is the development in the kingdom. In the passage about Shabbat, Exodus 31, we see this delineation of tasks in the creation of the Shabbat, which is actually the creation of the holy, the creation of the sanctification. We are actually sanctifying the Shabbat. Adonai has given it to us to sanctify the Shabbat. It says this in Genesis 2, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, along with everything in them. On the seventh day God was finished with his work which he had made, so he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. God blessed the seventh day and separated it as holy, because on that day God rested from all his work which he had created, so that it itself could produce. That last line, so that it itself could produce. What did Adonai do? He made seed-bearing plants that could produce after themselves. He made fruit trees that could produce after themselves. And here he made the Shabbat, which is a cessation of all work, resting from his work. He created the Shabbat so that it could produce. Well, that in itself is a little bit of a thing to stumble over, because we're talking about the day of rest, and you would think the day of rest would not be a day of production, but rather the day of rest is a day of production. It produces more of itself. It's rest producing rest, and that's the process that we get into when we take the Shabbat and sanctify the Shabbat and create a rest out of that Shabbat, out of that day. We talked about two principles today, that Adonai sanctified the seventh day, and that Adonai sanctified the people of Israel. That to sanctify is to create or recreate for holiness, to set aside and recreate for holiness. So I'm glad to share this chiasm structure with you in this passage. Hopefully this was a blessing to you, and may Adonai keep you and go with you as you go. By all means, if you have any questions or would like to reach out to us, you will find my email address below, or you can comment in the comment field. Please reach out to us. We enjoy your discussions and enjoy the conversation. So may Adonai bless you this week. Shalom, shalom.